Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Mr. Zombie here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 9 of What If Izuku Had a Villain Quirk. I just wanted to greet you guys by saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. So, we begin. The sound of a roaring crowd answered the call of President Mike from the press box of a gargantuan stadium.
This year, we are presenting to you some of the hottest events of sports festival history.
The man's voice was not shocking to hear from the speakers. The man's eccentrics fit perfectly with being a UA announcer. The sound of the crowd was deafening as they responded to his proclamation. At the Midoriya residence, the mother of Midoriya was watching the television with an anxious smile on her face. Midnight smiled to herself, more than ready to see if her student did well. From the darkened entrance to the stadium field, Midoriya and his classmates entered with heads held high. Hisashi eagerly introduced the dazzling students of 1A. Various emotions flew from the thoughts of the pupils, from crippling anxiety to pure excitement. Classes 1B through K filtered through behind them, their introductions being more curt. Nomori's voice called from a podium above the students, thrusting her whip into the air, revealing herself to be the umpire of the first year's events. Mainly the men in the crowd, even some of the teenagers in front of her were drooling at her outfit. She was quick to snap the men back to attention by announcing the first year student that would be reciting the student pledge, Katsuki Bakugo. This was met with a shocked reaction from his class. A nervous sweat unknowingly made its way down most of 1A's backs as they watched their classmate walk forward.
I just want to say, I'm gonna win.
The monotonous voice of the blonde echoed in the empty stadium as dread filled his classmates. Needless to say, the rest of the stadium's occupants were not happy. The explosive boy continued to be nonchalant, unfazed by the crowd's jeering or Ida's scolding. Izuku had an analytical look fixed on his old friend, noticing the tone held in his voice was a serious one. He would have to be careful around him. Then again, he also had to be careful around the hundreds of other students that now saw his class as a target. Midnight once more called notice to herself as she activated a hologram.
Time to see where our first event will be. Whatever will our students be facing?
The slot-ish display froze on an event labeled Obstacle Course. The R18 umpire began to explain the objective of the event was to simply run along a 4-kilometer perimeter of the stadium. A shady smirk, all too familiar to a certain jungle-haired boy, took over her face.
Now, I wouldn't want to hinder all of you too much, so here's the deal. Stay inside the area, and you're free to do whatever you please.
She cracked her whip at the gates leading to the outside opening for them.
So take your places at the starting line.
A slightly worried look glazes over Nomori's eyes as she glances at her protege. In his head, she knew. He was already becoming anxious and setting boundaries on how he would use his quirk. She recenters herself and raises her arm, calling for them to begin. A mad dash for the exit had begun, the excitement already raising in everyone's hearts.
What an explosive start! I see there is absolutely no hesitation amongst our students. Any commentary to give here, mummy man?
The odd pro hero turned to Aizawa, who responded by rhetorically asking how he was talked into being here.
Okay then, do you perhaps have any thoughts about what their first obstacle will be?
Onyx's eyes stared from behind a sea of bandages, as he simply responds with,
The door.
He wasn't wrong. The crowd of students was shoulder to shoulder as they fought their way out of the doorway. In the blaring chaos, a quiet crackling filled the location as ice suddenly froze the entirety of the archway, even spreading outwards as the culprit shot out of it. Todoroki called out a monotonous apology to his peers, only to be surprised at seeing several students flying through the air, and even more slipping along the ice. A cry alerted the heterochromatic boy to a certain diminutive student, who was using his quirk to bounce along the ice. Mineta called out a taunt as he prepared to, most likely, immobilize the other pupil with his quirk. He was promptly stopped by a large metallic object that smacked him out of his way. Eyes traced along the mechanical object to see beady red sensors. Several students recognized it as a robot from the UA entrance exam.
Ooh, enemies have shown up out of nowhere! I bet we're in for a real treat here!
As President Mike spoke, more robots joined the first.
A test of strength and cunning! It's a Robo Inferno!
Many students began to catch up, Kaminari doing a double take at the beastly bot. He pointed a shaky finger as his eyes filled with traumatized fear. Are those the 0-point robots from the practical test? Dude, you gotta be kidding me! Additional cries of protest and worry came from the amassing group of teenagers. At the helm of the clutter, Shoto stood undaunted by the looming danger. Ice began to spread from underneath his foot. So this is what the other students faced during the entrance exams. Along his arm, more ice accumulated. They obviously went through a lot of trouble, but I wish they prepared something a little more difficult. Especially since my dear old dad is watching. Sheets of ice spread out in a glacial tsunami, engulfing one of the mechanical beasts and crystallizing it to stay put. The powerful male took off with no hesitation, as some called out that they could pass through as well. Careful, I froze them while they were off their balance, on purpose. The chunks began cracking as the whole thing tilted over, threatening to crush those who were too close. A plume of dust flew into the air, obscuring the view of those watching.
That's Todoroki from Class 1A pulling ahead to an early lead with a devastating display.
An eccentric announcer passionately stood up.
Amazing! He's one we should watch. It almost seems unfair. Your thoughts?
Aizawa's voice was calm, as he described how the boys' attack was a blend of both offense and defense. Yamada expressed his approval as he further complimented the student. However, things were looking a bit more grim for the other ones. A baton of at least 20 more robo-villains had arrived, and Midoriya felt a pit of dread form in his gut. From across the city, his mother was calling for him to be careful and to just run, tears flowing from her eyes. Panic began to spread as several people realized that the students had been trapped under the robot. That panic was cut short soon. The two students, Kirishima and Tetsu, tore through the steel carcass with rage burning in their eyes. The two bantered between each other as some of the individual students began to pair up to make it through. A loud detonation drew the notice of the congregation as Bakugo soared up through the air, launching himself over one of the robots. The volatile blonde was followed closely by other students capable of such acrobatic feats. A certain juniper-haired boy took off into a sprint towards the mecha villains and shouted to his fellow UA students. I'm sorry about this, but whatever you do, he shook ever so slightly as he bent his body to a more aerodynamic shape. Don't breathe in the toxin! Dual concentrated blasts of jade-colored vapor escaped him as he shot off at blinding speeds. Gliding along the ground, the power of the propulsion brought him to the same velocity as Ida, who had started his own fight forward. Eraserhead watched his students with pride, as his companion commented on how 1A seemed to be the more dominant class for the leaderboard.
It only makes sense if you really think about it.
A calculative stare reaches from behind the gauze around his head.
They have faced the real danger our school is meant to prepare them for. They saw it firsthand what true villains are like and overcame it.
Midoriya made an abrupt stop at a wall of robo-villains that was being blasted by some sort of explosive force. He glanced behind to see Yamamo holding a cannon, clearly being the source of the attack. The path was now completely clear for everyone to pass through. The Robo Inferno obstacle was defeated.
For those of you who thought the first obstacle was easy, let's see how you feel about the second one!
The terrain the contestants now faced was not pleasant to say the least.
If the students want to get past this zone, they're gonna have to get creative. It's the fall!
Many were hesitant on what their next moves should be. While two of them were already sure of themselves, Sue leapt through the air and landed with practiced ease on a rope several meters away. Meanwhile, a pink-haired girl decked out with gadgets had now gained a spotlight. She bragged about how the support course was allowed to bring whatever homemade invention they wished to the festival, all in an attempt to make things more fair for them. The goggled teen activated a mechanism at her side which fired forth a harpoon that pulled her forward as the oddly designed boots she wore whirled to life, giving her some sort of hover ability. Seeing the students go through with such ease spurred forth movement from the rest of the contestants. Far ahead of them, two members of Class 1A led the race to the finish. Katsuki Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki. The son of Endeavor acknowledged his classmate, noticing how he had finally fired himself up. The ashen blonde angrily called out to the boy, attempting to taunt and threaten him, neither of which noticed a third male taking a less notable route. The apprentice of Midnight was quietly leaping from pillar to pillar, being unseen by all the other students. The heterochromatic male had finally arrived at the third and final obstacle.
And here we are at the last obstacle, and everyone had better tread carefully.
Two gigantic signs were displayed for all to see at the beginning of the hurdle.
Because you're stepping onto a minefield!
A quick rundown of the non-lethality of the mines was made so as to not worry the crowd too much. The rather sadistic sound and tone of President Mike's voice made more think otherwise. Pink explosions launched students into the air, relatively unharmed. Further up, Shoto's frustration began to build, realizing that the final part of the course was an impotent to those in the lead. A booming sound drew his frustration to the second place competitor. "It's over now, bastard! Your declaration of war was to the wrong person!" The furious student attacked the other. The blaring sounds of their fighting distracted them from the faint hissing. The duo were solely focused on their fight, ignoring the presence of someone tailing them. Izuku weaved through the students and the mines, using sparring shots of his gas to glide along the ground in a serpentine motion.
Whoa, what's this? It appears a third has finally joined the race for first!
Hizashi called attention to the jungle-haired team just as he announced a potent stream to vault over his two classmates. The two glance in shock as an all-too-familiar smoke rises over them, both dodging to the sides. "I am truly sorry about this, but I wasn't lying when I said I was aiming for first." The boy suddenly performed a mid-air spiral, releasing two streams of his neurotoxin to create a barrier of sorts. "If you want to catch up, you'll have to deal with that first." Explosions and the crackling of ice were the two most prominent sounds in his ears as the Verdane-eyed youth finally ran out of his toxin, focusing on continuing to sprint to the goal.
In a shocking turn of events, Izuku Midoriya has both boosted his lead and hindered the progress of his two classmates!
The stadium watched as the three grew ever closer to the finish line.
Eraserhead, your students are amazing! What the heck are you teaching them?
Shota calmly deflected the praise from him to his own students, knowing that no matter what circumstance, the change displayed on the field was the result of their own drives.
Did you hear that? Eraserhead is a terrible teacher!
The sudden insult prompted a double take from the man.
Who would have imagined at the beginning of the race that would be a non-stop mega mix of surprises? The first to make it back to the stadium in the first place winner is... Izuku Midoriya! He is our champion!
Roaring cheers filled the stadium as tear-filled ones echoed from a boy's mother back at their home. Midnight hid her pride-filled eyes from the stadium. "Well, what do you know? I guess that kid finally got the guts to use his quirk in such circumstances," the R18 hero thought to herself with a smirk. About damn time he finally realizes that he should not hinder himself just because his quirk seems dangerous. A blue-haired psychopath watched the broadcast with a mix of interest and annoyance. "So, the gas emitter kid won first. I guess I should let Master know about this." Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before this video ends. Firstly, we got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deeper into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. So go check it out if you're in the mood for some jujitsu action. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here on We the Celestials, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the crew. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 years and up to join the crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interest by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be. Whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits, we're always looking for more members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day.